Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from inside of a coffee filter. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone, for another week of the podcast. We've got a packed episode for you today. We've got of course, some Indy Car after talking about the Hy-Vee races last week that were coming up on the weekend. Of course, the Hungarian Grand Prix and the upcoming Belgian Grand Prix that we have for Formula One. Some League of Legends series, and then, of course, some Magic the Gathering to top it all off. Justin, how are you doing, man?
Doing very well. Good to see you, Aaron. Like you said, we do have a packed show this evening, so why don't you kick it off here? Start us with the Rose, Thorn, and Seed.
Sounds good. So my Rose this week is from my Seed last week. We watched our friend's dog, Wally. He was just a great boy all weekend long. It was really fun having him, and he and Senna, of course, had a blast just playing constantly for the past 4 days or so. And so we just dropped him back off at home this morning. The only thing that was a little funny was he typically sleeps in our friend's bed with them, and so we kind of have preferred to keep our bed mostly to ourselves and all. And the first couple nights he really tried to come up there, and he snuck up a couple times in the middle of the night while we were asleep and all, just at the foot of the bed, not going too crazy, but he found his way in, and I think he hopped up in front of Senna the one morning, and we were like, nope, get off. And then 3 days in, she went, and she hasn't tried to get up on the bed. Obviously she could do it easily if she wanted to, but because we've had that as a no zone, she tested the limit after the first couple days of him being over. So we were like, nope, back on the ground. You're not doing that. We're not starting that off. So that was a funny little moment from the weekend, but yeah, it went really well. He's a good pup, so it was fun to have him.
Very cool. Yeah, the real estate on beds, not not. There's not a whole lot of it sometimes.
No, it's prime real estate. I can't just be giving it away. That's property. No one's living rent free.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, it was a fun weekend. My thorn is just the upcoming summer break for Formula One. We've been spoiled over the past month or so. We've had 4 races in the last 5 weeks, and it's been a lot of fun to watch. So I'm definitely I'm gonna get a little bored without it over those 4 weeks in between races that we have coming up after the Belgian Grand Prix. So small thorn, but I'm definitely not looking forward to it. I love being in the height of the season and just getting to watch racing. So, but then my seed for this week, my mom's birthday is coming up, and it sounds like all the kids are not going to be able to get together at the same time just because of plans and trips and vacations and all.
Gotcha.
So we're most likely going to be getting together this Sunday just to get lunch and celebrate a little bit with her and everything. So I'm looking forward to that. My dad just is getting back from a trip that he went on. And also I'm looking forward to hearing about his trip and everything. So should be a nice time this weekend.
Where was your father on the trip?
He went to the Canary Islands. It was related to some missionaries from their church and all who live over there. There was a invite to kind of come and just experience life with them out there. Nothing crazy or anything, but he just got to go and live with them in the Canary Islands for 7, 8, 10 days. I forget how long exactly. And
Okay.
these beautiful, beautiful ocean waters and everything. It looked like a very relaxing and nice time. So, but just made it back. So he had a safe trip home and all. But yeah, I'm excited to hear more about it other than the little brief, pictures and short texts he was sending to the group of us about what he was doing day by day and all.
Yeah, that's very cool. Canary Islands, that does not like ring a bell as to where it is in the world.
So
Is it a Caribbean?
no, so off the coast of northwestern Africa, kind of between like the top of Africa and Spain, like in
Okay.
that like ballpark.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so a decently long trip to get over there. Probably, I would imagine like 10 to 11 hours of flights total to fly to Europe and then fly from there to the islands and all. So
Gotcha. Okay. Very cool. Well, I'm glad that it went well. I'm glad that he's home safe. That's cool.
yeah, absolutely. So that's all I've got for my rose, thorn, and seed for this week. But what's been going on over your way?
All right, let me unpack this little picnic basket here for you. So my rose here for the week, I got some great news in the mail, a letter that I've been waiting for God knows how long, just absolves me of any crime. The intergalactic police will no longer be looking for me, so I'm
What'd you do?
super happy. I'm not even at liberty to talk about it.
Oh man.
But yeah, the bit in the mail says, absolved of all crimes in this galaxy and all others. So yeah, just very, very happy to hear that. My thorn here this week is just it's like
Sounds
like a desert.
doozy.
Well, no, it's just a desert as far as Commander games go. They've just been non-existent. I can't catch one. I'm looking up and down. I've got my Pokeballs. I'm ready to catch them. But there just feels like there's none. I'm walking around in the tall grass, just going back and forth, right
Can't even
outside
find a
of the Poke Center.
Caterpie.
No Caterpies even. So it's been pretty tough out here, but we're surviving. It's okay.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
a
my
bummer.
seed here.
But
Yeah, I mean, whatever.
yeah,
It's fine.
you've still been able to, I guess, get some deck building and whatnot, and some Pioneer stuff. I'm imagining.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a lot of deck building. I have an order coming in, a bunch of squirrels. It's a lot of squirrels and a playset of a dino. I'll tell you all about that deck once I have it together, probably next week.
Sounds good.
But basically, I guess that is a pretty good point. I have my binder down to like it's really just a couple of play sets of cards that may be helpful in the future, but will likely just kind of get bulked and just like a couple of singles. So I've pretty much built all of the decks, like, as budget and casual as they go. But I think I've built all the decks that I can out of like the bulk in the collection that I've had. So even on that front, my creativity will be dwindling and my wallet will begin hurting because I'll start saying to my wallet like, "Hey man, I need new cards." And my wallet will be like, "No, please, just use the ones you have." And I'll say, "No, Mr. Wallet." So it'll get pretty brutal for him. But yeah, overall, it's a just like yours, just a minor thorn, just something I wanted to bring up. And then my seed here for the week, Sarah had the opportunity to get a weekend in. I believe it's at her like aunt and uncle's like bay house, I believe. I think it's the one that we went to up in Vermont a couple years ago. So that'll be in a couple weeks. We'll drive up, take a little weekend to kind of just hang out by the water. So that'll be pretty neat. So definitely looking forward to that. But other than that, man, that is my rose, thorn, and seed.
Nice, that's awesome, and I'm excited for you to get that nice relaxation in at the vacation house. It's always good to just get out and about, get some R&R in. So
For sure.
excited to hear it. But to dive right into this week's episode,
Let's do it.
as I mentioned, for the top of the quick hitters, we had the High V home front 250 and the High V one step 250 IndyCar races this past weekend on Saturday and Sunday. It looked like it was going to be a pretty exciting weekend, and it ended up definitely panning out well, in particular for one specific driver. Mr. Joseph Newgarden ended up winning both races.
Let's go.
Just had a really solid car throughout the weekend. They were able to make the adjustments in the pit stops and all that they needed to get the right feel. He was down a little bit, I believe, in the first race in the Hy-Vee home front 250. Was kind of hanging around like third, fourth, like not really getting a great feel for the car. After one of the pit stops, and they make a lot of times they'll do like little tweaks to the wings and stuff when they come into pit stops, and the adjustments that he and his engineers made all the difference for him to sweep on through, take the lead there, and get the race win. Roman Grosjean, for a guy who doesn't do the oval tracks very often, or probably isn't the most comfortable with them, finished P11 in that first race, and then P12 in the second race out of 28. So he had two solid finishes, getting him back into some like better point scoring positions and all. But still, obviously not his forte. But yeah, the second Hy-Vee 250, the Hy-Vee one step 250. On Sunday was just the Joseph Newgarden show. He led for over 200 of the 250 laps. Just really crushed it. Solid race from him. So a good performance on the weekend for their team there.
Now, who does Newgarden race for?
Newgarden races for, I'll tell you in a second, because I actually am not 100% sure.
Okay, gotcha. So then, in the meantime,
so he's Team Penske.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's his teammate?
Will Power is one of his teammates, and then I think there is another one. I'm just skimming through to see if there's anyone else that. No, yeah, I guess it would just be the two of them. So Will Power and Joseph Newgarden, and then Will Power finished P2 in the second race and P5 in the first race.
Whoa. Okay, so a team can have as many drivers as they want?
It's kind of funky. There's not really a constructors championship as like, so the teams kind of can take on as many drivers as they want. So there's a number of like Chip Ganassi Racing drivers. There's a number of Aero McLaren drivers. Andretti Autosports has a few guys. So there's definitely a bit of that, and then there's some of the smaller teams that just have like singular drivers. So
okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Okay, so now does your performance on day one factor into day two? Like,
no, so they had separate qualifyings for them and everything. So they had qualifying and then the race like a couple hours later.
Wild.
And also, yeah, running through pretty quickly on those and all.
Damn, that's a really like just super busy weekend. Now, who do they have doing coverage for these races? It's Hinchcliffe. Do they ever bring F1 people over to IndyCar the way they do with Hinchcliffe?
I haven't seen that happen. Except for, actually, no, I lie. I'm pretty sure Gunter was on a IndyCar broadcast, Gunter Steiner, for the Haas team principal. But I don't think I've seen too many other folks. I haven't seen like Nico Rosberg. I feel like would be someone that you could bring over, similar to Hinchcliffe coming over with F1, like similar kind of vibe. Former racing driver who is in the broadcast and all. But yeah, I think Gunter being over there was the only one that I recall seeing, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's more like here and there, especially when F1 has like some breaks. Maybe during the summer break, we might see one or two folks end up being a part of broadcast for any upcoming races in the IndyCar world.
And not saying like they're not assuming that knowledge translates back and forth, just if there were any that were like hobbyists of IndyCar, because I imagine that's like kind of what connects Hinchcliffe, is like he's a hobbyist of Formula One, but then also is like an quote unquote expert on like one motorsport. So you could definitely kind of translate that into another using his like fan knowledge and appreciation for the sport. So just curious if it went the other way. Sorry.
Yeah, you could probably honestly, someone who might be interesting to have would be like Fernando. I don't think he would ever do it, but as someone who's raced in IndyCar and F1, that would be kind of neat to see from his perspective. But I just doubt he would ever do something like that.
Sure. And not speaking to Fernando specifically, but just a problem you could have is sometimes the track skill doesn't always translate to be eloquent the way like you talk about a sport. Yeah. However, I mean, you hear him talk in interviews and such, so I can't imagine that would be the case with Alonso. Just something that I think of like with like bringing just like a sportsman onto broadcast, you know? Kind of like a Nico Rosberg. It's just kind of shitty.
It's just kind of shit. Oh, harsh. But to just slide past that one, we had some news come out about the Las Vegas Grand Prix this year. So F1 apparently is threatening to block off the view from venues that are not like willing to participate in the like licensing fees and whatnot to for their patrons to view the race and all. So like how some of the big hotels are selling like F1 ticket packages and everything, but also including like the fact that I'm sure the rooms that have views of the circuits are like specially priced and everything for the weekend. But yeah, there's some people on the, I guess, like casino owners and whatnot on the strip that are like, but what? Like, it's a street race, so like just anyone should be able to just be on the street and watch it. And it's like, no, bro, like they have street races all over the world. You can't tell me that you can just walk down fucking the streets of Monaco and be like, whoa, this F1 race for free. Like, that's not what street race means. It doesn't mean that there's no tickets and no like entry and all. But
what about those houses along the route though? Like,
so, I mean, I'm sure that there's things like that. It seemed like it was more directed at businesses that like would have like the potential to view, but it was.
So they're gonna be they're gonna have like blackout.
So what it had been discussed of putting up barricades and blinding lights to block viewing, which I think it like just fucking spotlights from like away from the track at the offending venues. I thought it was hilarious.
That's really tough.
But I mean, at the same time, like I do understand that if there has to be some sort of, and I don't know what it is, but like for other places that are street circuits, like restaurant, well, I guess like I imagine Albert Park doesn't have too many like just random restaurants around it, but I'm sure like for Monaco as an example, I seriously doubt that they are just like, oh yeah, like anyone who just wants to come eat at this restaurant and get a view of the race, just come on down, no ticket needed. Like I'm sure there's going to be things that are sectioned off, barricaded off and all, but since it's going right down the Vegas Strip, I'm sure doing that would be a bit tougher. So kind of going at this licensing fees and all from F1's side to kind of protect the viewership and their ticket packages and everything.
Sure.
They're willing to go to those more drastic measures, I guess.
That sounds pretty brutal. Having well, I mean, the race is only it's like an hour and a half, so 90 minutes of lights from just certain viewpoints. Not the worst thing, but using your Monaco point, think about the casino that during a race weekend. Like, how many times do they say that? How many times are they referencing that casino? Like, you have to figure it's going to go the other way, where if these, let's say, hotels 1, 2, and 3 are not paying for the licensing for these packages, you can better believe that the buildings would almost be as though non-existent in reference to the race.
Yeah, but at the same time, for hotels and all, I seriously doubt that any hotel is not having some sort of ticket package that weekend where you or the room rates are just going to be exorbitant. So it's not like any random schmo is going to be able to just be like, yeah, I had this room booked 2 years ago for $50 and now I'm living the dream. So would be sick.
You'd only be able to see
it seems like it's mostly the restaurants and casinos that are more ground level and whatnot that are being kind of having this directed at them. But yeah, either way, I just thought it was pretty amusing to see the extent that they're going to.
I hope to see those floodlights on that weekend.
I'm curious if we'll notice them now that we've talked about it. But to move on, I did want to briefly touch before we get on into the actual Hungarian Grand Prix. But I don't know. Did you see any of the Formula One kids broadcast stuff that they did? So this was I think the first week or one of the first weeks that they had a kids broadcast where they had the graphics were very like I had talked about Nickelodeon doing for the NFL and all with the slime in the end zones and whatever other CGI stuff. But for the Hungarian Grand Prix, they did a broadcast for kids. They called it the F1 Juniors podcast. All of the drivers had a animated little little character that looked kind of like
avatar
them. Yeah,
sprite.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. That looks vaguely like them and all. For the broadcast, the graphics honestly looked really kid graphics were pretty clean, looked good. The only thing from the broadcast that was kind of not as big of a positive, because I thought it looked like a great broadcast, was I guess apparently Danica Patrick, and I saw this afterwards, but I didn't see the actual clips, but she was asked by a young girl on the broadcast. I guess they had kid, whether it was before the race or during different parts, had kids asking questions and all. And this girl was like, oh, wouldn't you like to see more women in F1 and all, and female drivers and everything? And Danica was basically like, well, racing's a pretty aggressive and masculine kind of sport, so it's just really not something that women are really naturally inclined to be aggressive and have that killer instinct and yada yada yada. And I was like, hearing and seeing this all afterwards, I was like,
Wow.
you're an IndyCar race winner. You drove in NASCAR. Like, you are one of the perfect examples of someone that young girls and young women can look up to as someone who did make it and into those sports, if that's something
Hmm.
that they're like excited about. And so to like be like if you're gonna take that kind of approach at all, just to like, maybe it was just that she was on the spot and didn't phrase it right or whatnot, but it seemed like it was just like a word vomit of this like negatives about women trying to come up in racing, instead of just being like, well, yeah, like the perspective on things are going to have to continue changing and growing so that women are more inclined to try to get into this field if they're interested in it and everything, and for those opportunities to be available for them and all. Like, it's been such a male dominated sport for a long time,
Hmm.
so there's still a lot of progress. But yeah, it would be great to see more women in racing. Like,
Hmm.
and to kind of round it out with just like, yeah, this isn't really a women's thing. Like, sorry, it's like, yikes. You would be the first person I would expect to say like the exact opposite. Like, I
Right.
could do it, so yeah, get out there if you want to and go for it. Like, what? Very
I
very
mean,
bizarre.
okay, here's a bizarre take, but
Hit me
with
with
there
it.
being so much Saudi Arabian money behind Formula One and their like views on women, maybe that's like Danica Patrick's like big brain thing on why she's saying that of like, I don't think you really want to be involved with this. Maybe that's like, I think that's being very favorable towards Danica Patrick, but yeah, that seems like an odd thing to say.
Yeah, it was and maybe something like that had something to do with it in the back of her mind, or maybe it does have something to do with just she got put on the spot and was like, like, this is kind of how it has been, but didn't like phrase it well enough to be
Right.
like, but like, yeah, like that would be really good to see. It's just we're not there yet, kind of thing. Um but either way, hopefully for future kids broadcasts, we'll get some more Danica Patrick inspiration to look
Let's
forward to.
go.
Um, but but looking forward to kind of some of the upcoming F1 for the upcoming engine regulations and all for 2026. Um, there is apparently going to be a meeting between teams and the FIA about the technical regulations. This was something that, of course, we've heard that Christian Horner has talked about. Like, oh, this is going to be tough. There's been some discussions about kind of how the engines will work and all, and how because they're going to be potentially transferring more to like the battery power and whatnot, that teams won't be able to have like full power down the straights and things like that, just based on like the way the engines will work and regulations and all. But apparently, along with that, Renault seems to be very far from reports, seems to be 15 to 25 kilowatts, or about 20 to 30 horsepower behind the other engine competition right now. So they are struggling a lot with the development of their engine for these new regulations. So there's going to be a discussion, I guess, about some of the changes, both in regards to what they feel like it would kind of hurt the actual racing aspect of it by having to kind of turn engine power down on the straights and whatnot to charge up
Hmm.
batteries. and along with like some teams, I imagine Red Bull feels like they're a little bit behind based on seeing some of the comments. Now seeing that Renault and who is Alpine's engine supplier, also seems to be kind of very off the mark. We of course have plenty of time until that 2026, but that development is going on now. So
Sure.
it's something to just keep an eye on to see if they do make any changes, since they have had these engine freezes kind of going on for the last few years.
Now, do you know, does Renault plan to be supplying other teams by that point?
I think based on how it's gone for them recently, probably not.
Right.
I think Red Bull was the last Renault engine buyer outside of like their own constructor, whether that was Renault
Yeah.
or Alpine. So it's been a few years since we've had them supplying engines, but nonetheless, it would definitely really be brutal to see such a drastic difference. And I mean, that car would just be so far off the pace of everything else if it's that far behind in that engine power and all.
Yeah, big time. No, that's really interesting because yeah, even though it is what feels like many years out, it's kind of imminent as far as the competition timeline is concerned.
Yeah, and so there's like right now there's still time that if they need to make changes or shift some of those regulations that they can, but it does kind of have to be discussed at this point in time, since there is a lot of development that goes into these over the next couple years before we hit those new regulations in 2026. But staying with the Alpine team, Laurent Rossi, their CEO, has been replaced this past week. So he was replaced by Philip Creef, who I'm not sure, I don't exactly recall what his tie to the company or how he was related in. But Alpine definitely seems to be shifting some of their personnel and all. Laurent Rossi is staying with the organization in some capacities, but will be focusing on non F1 projects and all as well. So Alpine kind of starting to make some of these shifts. I know earlier in the season there had been some conversations about them kind of struggling, falling behind the pace after Aston Martin leapfrogged them from last year's Constructors' Championship and came and made so much progress. There was a little bit of a hot seat for Otmar, it sounded like earlier in the season, which some of those conversations have calmed down, but seeing some of these other changes, and of course with Alpine's very, very rough last little stint of it, this may not be the last change that we see with their organization, kind of as the year goes on.
Yeah, it's been two double DNFs back to back for Alpine, and while some of those moments may be out of their hands, like specifically for Hungary, we'll look at the Zhou anti-stall at the start, which kind of like creates a lot of these issues that wasn't necessarily their fault. But it does beg the question in some other moments, where they're lacking pace, maybe lacking some team direction, these kind of things. So yeah, it's not it's not. Yeah, I was going to use the word unreasonable. I'll say it's not unreasonable or out of the question to look at leadership as like something to shift around.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when those conversations happened earlier on in the season, Otmar kind of spoke out and was like, "We're on our trajectory for like we knew that we weren't going to be fighting for wins and podiums this year. Like we're on our path that we have laid out to the powers that be and all. So just because it does look rough doesn't mean that we're not still on track with like what our goals and all are for progress with the car and development and yada yada. So
Yeah.
so yeah, we could see more changes, but we may not. It is just one of those things that we'll have to wait and see. I don't think they're going to be as aggressive as Red Bull has been with big sudden changes. But the CEO switch definitely was an interesting note. It kind of brought some of those topics back up in my mind. But looking again towards this Belgian Grand Prix weekend, Alfa Romeo is going to be running a special little livery with their partnership with Kick Streaming, the new big streaming platform. So they'll have a lot of neon green on the car, the wheel or the like tire covers in the front wing, rear wing, and everything will have some bright neon kick green colors on the livery this coming weekend.
So I might be stupid, but how do sponsorships work? So is F1 giving Kick money, or not F1, is Alfa Romeo giving Kick money to be on the car, or does Kick give Alfa Romeo?
Yeah, Kick gives Alfa Romeo money to be on their car, like advertising money, basically.
Right.
It's like an advertising expense. You get that your name out there to be seen by however many millions of people are watching F1 and everything. And of course, with like a special weekend livery. Similarly, I assume that the liveries and there are some like fees associated for like Kick to have a unique livery for Alfa Romeo to run, similar to like when McLaren or Williams have run the Gulf livery for their partnership with the Gulf Oil Company. I imagine that Gulf is like, oh yeah, like here, we'll pay for the paint job kind of thing.
Sure, that makes sense. I just wonder how these things happen. I just often wonder because like you see, I don't know, man. Like it boggles my mind. Like you look on an F1 car and you'll see like the FTX logo, and it's like, how are they? Like why, and it is just kind of boggling what gets involved with Formula One, but it is like, I guess to a certain degree that it is like one of the biggest. I mean, you slap a name on there and you have eyes from all around the world. That is crazy.
Oh, yeah, and I think especially with, it seems like more up and not always, but like some of these up and coming kind of companies and all that are trying to get their name out, especially in recent years, the FTX, the different cryptos.
That's why I brought that up because all the cryptos. Yep, all got it.
Coinbase or like whoever else like has sponsored like Formula One teams. Seems like a similar kind of idea. They are oftentimes taking these very small but very visible spaces. Like you may not see that FTX logo when you're looking at the car from the side view, but as soon as they hop into the cockpit with Lewis Hamilton, it's just right there on the halo right in front of your face. So there's definitely some of those things that I imagine they're taking, like probably paying a good bit of money for more the not like the size and whatnot of their logo, but the likelihood that it's going to be seen in the broadcast and all. So, unfortunately, anyone who's trying to throw their sponsorship on Max's inside of his halo is probably fuming at how much money they're wasting, because halfway through the race you don't see him for the rest of it. So,
if not even that long. I mean, he he got the start on Lewis this past weekend, and he was just gone. They just like focus on Lando and everybody else.
Yeah, so just any of those sponsors are probably just like, man, not doing that again. But yeah, it's interesting, especially saying like we've had some of the bigger like companies like Golf do these sponsored liveries and whatnot. Or the teams doing their own unique liveries for certain races and things like that. But yeah, Kick is shelling out the money for that Alfa Romeo livery this coming weekend.
Well, and I guess that's why I asked, like, am I stupid? Because it just feels like, is that really where, like, your ad money's gonna go? You're just like, I'm just gonna slap it on an Alfa Romeo car and hope for the best.
I guess, and they've been putting a lot of money into like paying for streamer contracts and things like that. So
Yeah.
I don't know where all the money's coming from, but they are definitely like diving right in with trying to build up the platform and all. So
Right, for sure. I mean, hey, that's a lot of eyes, like we were saying. So
oh
yeah,
yeah,
no, that's super interesting. But yeah, I guess if you're looking for some video game streams, Kick's the place to go.
there you go. You'll have to
Whoa.
check it out. But yeah, you'll see the bright green all over that black and red Alfa Romeo car all weekend. It'll stick
Oh,
out
that's
like a
cool.
sore thumb.
That's
Um,
cool.
but to move on towards the upcoming Belgian Grand Prix, or I guess actually we'll look back first at the Hungarian Grand Prix from this past weekend.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah, probably start there. But what were your thoughts, I guess, on the qualifying format with the different tire requirements for Q1, Q2, and Q3, going with the hard, medium, and soft tires?
Call me crazy, but I thought it was actually pretty interesting. The understanding that I got from the drivers was like if you have that pace on the hards, you have that pace on you'll have that pace on the softs too. So from that perspective, it doesn't really like that isn't a it's a cause, but not like a big primary cause for like the shakeups. But specifically, like you see Joe at the top of what was it, Q1 or Q2?
And
I
Q1.
think on the hard tires. So I think in that regard, maybe Alfa Romeo just had the pace. I mean, we'll never know because of like the horrible start, but I do think it was pretty exciting, and I think the environmental impact, the whole like two less tires from each car, that's like this amount. They did all the math, and I was like, oh, that makes sense to
It's a
me.
lot of tires that are being saved. It's like I forget what it
Yeah.
was, but it was like thousands of tires over
Yeah, it's
a
a lot.
season. So
So that spoke to me. I understand Lewis's point where he says like it's not enough, but it is a step in the right direction, I think. So that's kind of really exciting. But then you also get the interesting competitive wrinkle of not only limited tire choice, but you may end up using up rubber that you would have had available for Sunday. And I think that's an interesting element to the qualifying. And I understand that can happen anyway, but yeah, there was something about the dictated tire compound where you get faster as it goes on. I thought that was just fine. It was super cool. I did not mind it at all. I didn't think it weakened the session at all. I don't think cars got robbed. You look at the grid, it
so
seemed go
So
ahead.
I think the and I agree with you. I thought it was really an interesting way to do it. It was exciting. Like it was kind of fun from like each session to session, not really knowing where that like limit was gonna get to in terms of like qualifying times, like where the cutoff would be. Because we've seen like we saw. I think it was earlier this year, or maybe it was last year. There were a number of times where Max just went out and did like one qualifying lap, his like warm up lap, his hot lap, his cool down lap, and just like P1, P1, P1 each time, just kind of knowing that the times were far enough out. But going from like the hard tires where the the top lap times a 118, 143 from Zhou Guanyu, into Q2 on the mediums where you're in the like mid 117s, then into Q3 where you're in the like 116s and all. There was like, from the team and drivers perspectives, I think that was also part of the shakeup of like the unknown of trying to figure out when to send your drivers out with the different compounds for like second runs and everything, how the progression of the circuit was going to be with the rubbering in of those racing lines. But I think the only contradictory opinion that I heard was just that, and I think it was Nico Rosberg had a comment about something to the effect of like, is it really good for racing, for quality racing, if cars are out of position? Because the mixed up, if cars are just like, don't you just want to see the best cars like always fighting at the top? And I think like from that perspective, like I no, like I think it's interesting to shake things up because it gives value to drivers having like just solid performances and figuring out the tire wear and like the limits and everything a little bit better than the other drivers. Like, you got to give them props for that. You don't want to, like, I think it's silly to be like, oh, like you did good figuring this thing out better than the drivers with the better cars. I mean, like, Alex Albon finishing highly in qualifying over the past few races and then getting people stuck in a DRS train behind him. It's like, hey, like that's fair game. Like that just kind of happens sometimes. You gotta like put it together every day of the weekend if you're gonna have the best weekend you can. If you fuck up qualifying, like, just because you're in the faster car, sometimes like that's just the way it goes. Like, that's on you. George Russell ending up in P18 and all because the team sent him out really late with a bunch of other cars who were all trying to start their hot laps at the same time, and he just got skipped over by Lando Norris and a couple other drivers. Sorry, like that's just you. It happens. Your team could have sent you out 30 seconds earlier. You would have been in clean air and all. You wouldn't have had the track to that peak condition maybe, but like you would have gotten a better lap in than what you did. So that's just kind of the way it goes.
There's something about like, I was kind of maybe on board with Nico's point right up until it was about like wanting to see the best fighting, because if anything, the only thing that is less interesting about out of position cars is maybe just a safety element. And I think of like a 24 hours of Le Mans where, you know, they have the different
classes
of cars starting at different times to make sure they're not like getting in the way of each other.
Right.
And that's the phrase that I think of when hearing like out of position cars in this way. But at the same time, I think they're so actually like competitively paced with each other,
right,
just within like fractions of, you know, you're splitting nose hairs at that point. So no, I think if I just disagree. I think if anything, it creates these I think of Harvey Dent when he's flicking his coin to his girlfriend, and he says, "I make my own luck." Like that's kind of what you're in for. Like you're talking about the Alex Albon, where yeah, it is this weird like. Well, that's unsatisfying if you're a fan of a team that's behind him, but the inverse is also true, where it's like, but wouldn't they be in a faster car? So why weren't they able to get past the Albon? So it
Right.
actually creates these moments like you were alluding to of interesting racing, maybe not like the most competitive wheel to wheel like top of the bracket, but it is interesting to some degree. So yeah, no, I thought it was just fine, and you end up, I mean, if Joe doesn't stall there, I think the start is much different, and then we actually would have seen the Alfa Romeo's pace. It's just fine to call them out of position because
Yeah, well, and that's the other part of it too. Is I think you're kind of going towards is you can call them out of position, but we also would have said that McLaren was out of position 3 races ago by performing so well all of a sudden and everything. And if we said, oh well, McLaren shouldn't have really been up there and all, and then you look at the performance, like Alfa
yeah,
Romeo might have like been, it might have been a track dependent thing. It might have
yeah,
been just that they're like bringing some upgrades and everything. But either way, I think like your point about like this isn't like Le Mans in the instance of like you don't have F1, F2 and F3 cars on the grid and you have to space them out so the F2 and F3 cars don't get in the way of the F1 cars,
because
like
that's like full seconds worth of pace difference, and that's
right.
unsafe.
Right, but you're looking at, like we've talked about, and also like many of the team principals have talked about with this season, that these are some of the closest qualifyings in terms of the gap from like 1 to 20 in a long time. Like there are not
Yeah.
these massive differences, and so it can be like an any given Sunday for some of these
Hmm.
teams where they can perform well. So I like the format. I think most viewership also agreed that they liked the format because it did make it more interesting. There is this like kind of unknown factor about what's going to happen, and to come down to it, we end up with Lewis Hamilton on the podium or on the in
Hmm.
P1 at the end of qualifying, just putting in a banger of a lap, crushing it, and going up on Max by 0.003 of a second. The
Wild.
closest, I think it was, they said something like the closest qualifying between P1 and P2, like qualifying differential since like 2009 or 2000, like it was way back since
Jeez.
they've had something that close. And then Lando Norris, just not even he was what, like 0.08 of a second back from there. Like,
Hmm.
so I mean, just an incredible top three there. That was so exciting to see who came out on top, and Lewis just really threw down the gauntlet. He had some hammer time and put down an insane lap there at the end.
It's funny you say that. I was me and Sarah were making fun of Lewis a little bit for all of the like catchphrases that he has that are like associated with him and like Bono's communications. Um, but whatever,
Well, they
he's
talked
great.
they talked about it on their like broadcast too, because with, I think with Lando they were like, all right, like head down, let's put in like some solid, like, or let's like push the pace or whatever. And like they're like, oh, that's McLaren's version of Lewis Hamilton's hammer time.
Right, right.
It's
That's
like,
ridiculous.
yeah, but it
Wild
is it
lap.
is amusing.
There is something about, I think, for the way they did qualifying for this weekend where like it feels good to the brain, and you know what I mean when I say this, where like so the first session is on the slowest tires, and then the second session is on the
Yeah.
middle tires, and then the last session where everybody's trying to go the fastest, it's on the fastest tires. And you like ramp through and you get to go faster and faster. Like that just logically makes sense to me. So that's like, oh, that's fun. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm here for that. That's cool.
Well, and it's also kind of closer to like one shot qualifying too, where you would just get like one lap to like one hot lap
Yeah,
and all. Where, and some people like find that exciting. You don't get to like it if you mess up your lap, if you go over the white lines or whatnot, your time gets deleted. Like that's your qualifying. Like deal with it. But I mean, because you're adjusting to the new feel of each tire each time, like it's not like in the earlier sessions where you can use a fresh set of soft tires in Q1 and put a lap down and then go, okay, I like felt it out, so now my next time when I use my next set of fresh soft tires in Q2, like I've already got that feel and everything. Like you're adjusting each time based on how the what the limits of those tires are. And when you have a weekend, like I wouldn't want to see that necessarily for like the upcoming weekend where we have a sprint weekend, because you only have one practice session. Like I do think that the teams need to get like to be able to get good data and a good feel on the different sets of tires. If you're going to do that kind of qualifying, you can't have
sure.
people just doing their primarily their like long run pace and everything to dial in the car's race pace and all on the mediums, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh yep, and now you have to do hot laps with low fuel on the all three tires after doing nothing like that in the only practice session of the weekend. But yeah, I thought it was a cool way to do it, and I hadn't thought about that really before. It was like a novel idea to me. I'm sure plenty of people have thought of that before, but I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And in my opinion, it turned out pretty cool. We got to see for the first time since the unspeakable race that Lewis and Max were up there in on the front row together. I think Christian Horner said that he was tugging at his collar a little bit with nerves ahead of the race, that he wasn't sure how that would go out, but yeah, getting into the actual race, like you said, Max is able to eke out that little lead at turn one after starting P2. It took him a long straight to get into the front of the pack, and then from there he was just gone.
On the dirty side of the grid, no less. You know, they made a point to talk about that.
He also
like,
was on the inside of the turn, though, so like, yeah, dirty side is obviously tougher to get the start, but like he did also have the inside line, so I don't know how much I bought into that, but either way.
Yeah, it was. I think it was a great start from the Red Bull, but more than that, I think what so kind of informed the early complexion of the race was the Alfa Romeo stall hits Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel Ricciardo hits one of the Alpines. The Alpines take each other out. So Zhou gets a 5-second penalty, but there was like a whole bunch of there's a whole bunch of positions that kind of get all messed up in that. So yeah, it was just it was a ridiculous start. Obviously, I have to retire Gasly. They end up having to retire Ocon as well. So just like really tough brutal. Early, but before all of that, at the front of the grid, you have the four-way little tussle between Lewis, Max, Lando, and Oscar. Oscar, who ends up getting a great start. Lando gets the a really key overtake done there on Lewis to take that place. So yeah, just like big boon for McLaren's start, and yeah, just solid for Max to just get it done right off the line.
Yeah, and that was the other real exciting part was Oscar sneaking in there and
Hmm.
sliding up into P2 off the get go there. It was, and that takes me to something I was definitely interested in hearing what your thoughts were, like, because I don't know if McLaren planned to give Lando the undercut. I know he obviously put a crazy outlap out there that he
Hmm.
just flew to make up time. But I mean, he had a slower pit stop than Oscar's by 0.3 of a
Hmm.
second. He was 2.5 seconds down on Oscar going into that pit stop. And they call him, or he gets called in, or he makes the call to come in, and they pit Oscar a lap later, and Oscar
Hmm.
loses that position. That's definitely a tougher. And I think that the idea was to ideally undercut Lewis to try
Yep.
and like give Lando a bit more space and all once Lewis pitted.
Hmm.
But I'm curious, like, if they were trying to kind of swap the cars around, or if Lando just kind of crushed it coming out on that hot lap and everything to take that P2 position. Because once he was up there, he was just smooth sailing as well for the majority of the rest of the race.
Yeah, I think a lot of it had to do with the covering off Lewis. And then, if they want to swap the places around, fine. But I think the pace of the Mercedes, I think they would have lost the position to Lewis, and then the McLarens are now split, and now you're like racing this Mercedes where it's so much easier to just give Lando the opportunity to put in that good outlap to just like maintain that 2-3, and then if you want to swap the cars around later you can. But I think they were worried of Lewis's pace like coming and like actually taking those points away. I think it was like overall strategic and saying like, yeah, we don't care who's 2 or 3, we just want these points.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair point. I felt so frustrated for Oscar because I'm so used to teams being like, oh, yep, whoever's the lead car gets the pit priority. I was ready for Oscar to get like the
Hmm.
prime pit stop, go out there. I was like, oh, McLaren 2-3, like we could see it. I mean, it was still early. It was the first pit stop and all. But then after coming out and seeing Lando ahead, I was like, one, how on earth did that happen? There
Hmm.
was a 2.8 second gap that he
Hmm.
just made up. And two, I was just like, oh, gutted for Oscar because he had started off so well and gotten that jump early on and held the position pretty well, not falling too far off of Max, building a gap to Lando. And I was like, he's just cruising, he's doing good. But yeah, I was a bit bummed for him there because then you start seeing it kind of fall away from him a little bit as the race goes on. But the other talking about pit stops, I mean, we had some excitement with some of the other teams, some kind of negatives with the Ferrari getting Charles Leclerc a solid
Hmm.
9.5 second pit stop for his first pit stop. And then we also saw kind of the other end of the spectrum with Red Bull putting in the fastest pit stop of the season so far with a 1.9 second pit stop there from the Red Bull boys. So Red Bull was just super clean on their pit
Hmm.
stops all weekend.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, 1.9 is just insane. I think that was the fastest pit stop from, it was either last year or 2021 as well.
I think it was
One.
a top. I think it's in the top 5 of like fastest pit stops like of all time.
Okay, gotcha. Wow, wild. So we are in like we are in the the best that pit stops have ever been.
I mean, well, it was interesting because there were the new regulations that they changed, like I think last year at the start of the year, that was slowing down pit stops a little bit because they wanted it to be safer for releases and things
Yeah,
like
wasn't it
that.
just something about like you
It was
can't
like
do
the
like practice you can't do like burnouts in your.
No, it was something with like the way the lights and the like green light to go and release out of the pit stops worked or something. I think there was a slight like delay added on to give the engineers a like better ability to look and make sure they were like in the clear and all before sending their drivers out. It was something
How are we
like
seeing
that.
so many unsafe releases then?
Uh,
Ooh.
beats me because it I mean, it was definitely something that was changed or there was something done about it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, not that long ago, but to yeah
Whatever. It don't matter. I'm
to
just saying 1.9 is pretty fucking quick. That's
oh
all.
yeah, very very fast. But to kind of go back over to Ferrari with their bad pit stop,
Yeah, that's how we got
only
here. That's right.
only to make matters worse, we have Charles Leclerc get the 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane as he locked up over the white line there, which
Hmm.
then, of course, comes into play later on in the race as we're getting to the latter stages and final results.
Hmm.
So it was not a day to write home about for Ferrari. And I think coming from me, I last week talked about how I was like, oh yeah, slow speed corners. Aston Martin and Ferrari might be able to jump back up. McLaren might be weaker because they seem to be unsure about these slow speed corners and all.
Hmm.
And they made me eat my words on both sides. Ferrari and Aston Martin down in P7 through 10 at the end of the race, and then of course the McLaren team finishing P2 P5 with a really solid finish. I think this does give some solid credit to McLaren and some solid expectations for them to continue this performance kind of throughout the rest of the season and it not being as track dependent as we might have initially thought with their progress.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the team would agree. I think they're still a little cautious as to how positive they're being about some of these results. While it definitely does look promising, I'm not sure, how confident they're going to be that they are, just perpetually ahead of these teams. Although I'm not sure I necessarily agree with Ferrari. I understand Charles drops a position, doesn't have a great qualifying, but both cars finishing the race, I think, was solid. Now, I'm not saying they have like massive DNF issues or whatever, but in weekends where other teams around you are having solid finishes, nothing's going wrong for them. It's good to just get some points in the book on a weekend. For Charles, going down a place, not great, still up in the points though. Carlos Sainz improves his position like by a pretty good margin, has a really good start. So I think Carlos Sainz did well to improve a tough Saturday.
Hmm.
And yeah, overall, not the best for Ferrari. I get it, but they weren't. I don't think they had the the ugliest weekend. If anything, I think they just kind of flew under the radar, got some solid points, and are just going to be super happy about that. Especially if you look at the minutia, I think they got their pit stops. Other than them, like both Sainz and Leclerc, just like boiling it up to the line, they I think they did really well as far as like communication, the tire strategy. I didn't see Ferrari putting a foot out wrong. Maybe their pace wasn't there, but they at least improved their position from Saturday, and I thought that was fine.
Yeah, and I mean, I think my point was more towards like their pace in general. I think their strategy and everything
Sure.
that they went with was fine, but I did expect them to kind of bounce back pace wise more so because
Okay.
now looking at the British Grand Prix and then the Hungarian Grand Prix, Ferrari scored 13 total points between those two races, and then with both drivers finishing in the points both times, only 13 points, where McLaren has gone and jumped and gotten 58 points in the last 2 weekends when you
Solid.
combine. So
Okay.
a 45 point margin of gain for McLaren. They leapfrogged Alpine at the British Grand Prix in the standings. They've now again nearly put up just as many points as they had last or at the British Grand Prix the race before. And so even though it's still a 80-point gap up to Ferrari, which is pretty significant, there's still a lot of racing to go, and with that kind of trajectory, if McLaren can keep that up, they could still have a shot at taking that P4 from Ferrari in the constructors and even potentially P3 from Aston Martin if they kind of keep this pace up.
Sure. So yeah, I think from that perspective, yeah, it's yeah, not looking great from Ferrari. I guess my view is just a little too zoomed in like on the weekend, not
Definitely like
thinking of like the bigger picture.
yeah, and it was
Mhm.
I mean definitely improvement from yeah, especially with Carlos, the tough qualifying on Saturday, not really putting the car up where they would have wanted it, just missing out on Q3.
Mhm.
But I think in the trajectory of their season, they've started falling back a bit. We saw them definitely competing up more towards those P4, P5 kind of positions a bit more frequently earlier on. So being down at the bottom of that top 10, even getting both drivers in the points is definitely not what they're looking for, I'm sure. But to talk about kind of it, sort of with Ferrari still, as we got through the race, George Russell was another one of the drivers that we saw make a lot of progress after a
Yeah, big
tough
time.
Saturday. Coming up, catching Carlos Sainz, and then with the 5 second penalty to Leclerc, leapfrogging him in the final positions and everything to slide up into P6. He just was on a burner at the end of the race to push his way up into those higher points positions. So a really awesome drive from George Russell to go from P18 up to P6.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting to see Mercedes kind of in this very competitive form, where even if they have a tough Saturday, by no real like fault of their own. It's not like Russell did a mistake. It was just kind of
Right.
bad timing from the squad, you would
Yeah.
say, right? So not the worst thing, but the fact that you have this like massive pace to just bring it back on Sunday, get the overtakes done that you need, just like one after the other after another. That's super exciting for them to be in this. You would say just like super competitive form. I think it's very exciting. Where Lewis is in contention for poles again. I think that's that's pretty cool and quite exciting for the Mercedes camp.
Yeah, I definitely am with you there. And looking just at their progress, like I know Lewis has not been super happy with the car, but they're definitely still like, yes, Aston Martin outpaced them early in the season. They're outpacing Aston now. Yes, McLaren's outpacing them now, but wasn't at the beginning of the season. Mercedes has kept a very consistent kind of performance throughout the year so far, which is definitely like one of those things that you often don't see with a team that seems to be kind of struggling to figure out their pace and everything. They with their change of their car and everything with the side pod design and their engineering and all, to still maintain that same performance throughout all the different changes and kind of struggles that they've had to even be hanging in that P4, P5 kind of range consistently throughout the year is definitely a solid thing, because that consistency, once they make the progress with the rest of the car, is going to pay dividends by not having engine failures or other issues and all throughout the weekends.
Yeah, big time. I mean, you just from a what am I trying to get at here? Like from a sport perspective, I think it is good to have one of these like large organizations back in kind of fighting contention. And just from a recent history perspective, I think it's fun to, like you were saying, like to kind of see them on a consistent but like rising trajectory. So yeah, I think from a lot of different angles that you slice it, I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, still we rise, man. Still we rise.
So many catchphrases.
But kind of still talking about some of the later stages of the race, we saw Sergio Perez, who also made a really nice drive, improving throughout the race, picking up positions and all, to eventually get into that podium after he's had this stretch of rough performances in qualifying in particular and all, to make it all the way up, and then have the exciting kind of not chase down of Lando Norris at the end as he was fighting through some traffic and all. I was like sitting on my couch. Colleen was probably like, "What is wrong with you? Why are you cheering for Lando?" I was like sitting there. I'm like, "Go Lando, go get that P2 again!" Because I was just like, I was pumped for him. He's driven so well, and I'm excited to see him having those performances. But I was like, even as a Red Bull fan, watching Checo kind of try and chase him down, I was just like, I'm so excited for Lando. I'm just like, I want him to hang on. So that was fun to watch, even though Checo, like I said, really, really solid race from him to make his way up through the grid.
Well, of course. And what was the gap like at that point? Was it like within was it possible for Perez?
Yeah, it was I think with like 10 laps to go, it was maybe about like 4 to 5 seconds, but
Okay.
Checo was gaining like a little over half a second a lap because Lando had started hitting traffic, and Checo was in pretty free, clean air for a bit. So he was like picking up chunks of time and gaining. But then as Lando made it through the back markers and everything, Checo then had to fight through them, and I think it ended up getting down to about a 3 second gap pretty quickly, and then kind of ended up ballooning back up to about 5 seconds by the end of the race.
Okay, gotcha. But yeah, Sergio able to get a whole bunch of work done there in the final stints. Okay, I didn't realize it was so tight there between Sergio and Lando. I think they were focusing on like other um
They were a bit. They kind of mentioned it briefly, but then it turned into also the hunt down from Lewis of Sergio, because he
uh
as he started to like as he got stuck and then wasn't like taking the time out of Lando anymore. Lewis went from like a 10-second gap back to like at the end of the race, Lewis was back 1.5 seconds from Checo. Like he was
gotcha.
flying up at the end as well, looking to pick up that potential podium and everything, but just ran out of. I'd say 2 more laps, and he might have had Checo there
Mm-hmm.
with the DRS and all. But much like the rest of the race, um, we've just kind of ignored talking about Max, just like his team and everything coming on the
Yeah.
radio.
I mean, like, what do you want to say? Like, great weekend, insane pace. Like,
No,
good for
just
them.
mostly just like funny, like the team coming on the radio in the like later laps, like probably 20 laps to go, and they're like, everything okay, just checking in. And he's like, yep, I'm good. And it's like they had gone so long without him saying anything, him just putting in these lap times and all, that they're like, are you there? Is the radio
Are you still
working?
alive, Max?
Like,
Max, are you there?
is the radio on? And then of course Max did his typical Max thing and goes, "Oh, what's that fastest lap time?" And they're like, "Oh, a 1:22.1," and he just goes 1.6 seconds faster immediately on the next lap to put in the fastest lap. Um,
Yeah, that's not so surprising. You got to figure he's been in like lift and coast mode for, decent amount of time. So he's, just like, all right, cool, we can just hammer time.
but to just like blow the fastest lap out of the water by that much was insane.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Um,
That's pretty cool.
like
But can you be surprised at this point?
no, of course not. But it's still amusing to me because he's just like, I've got nothing else to live for if there's
Yeah.
not a fastest lap point in it for me. Like,
Well, I think back to that guy's point where he's like, let him have it. He's done all this work, the whole race. Let him
right.
go for it.
And this time he didn't even have to pit specially
Right.
for it. He just goes out and does it. He wins by 38 seconds or something. 33 seconds over Lando.
Lando, not even close.
Just a crazy, crazy good race from Max. And to go on to get his 7th win in a row on the trajectory to potentially go for the individual driver win consecutive win record, which is held by Sebastian Vettel with 9 in a row. But the other big one, Red Bull getting the 12 race wins in a row, breaking the
Hmm.
record that McLaren had from the 80s that we had talked about. And ironically, which I didn't realize, Christian, this was from Christian Horner, an interview that he did, but Honda was McLaren's power, was their engine at that time. So Honda has set both or the previous and current record now for being the power unit for these teams getting these consecutive race wins.
Wow.
So Honda just hitting it out of the park with the performance of those engines and all, and I mean, the fact that we haven't, and maybe I'm jinxing it, but haven't seen Red Bull have any sort of reliability issues really this season, just makes that even more scary. Of when will it end for
Right.
everyone else?
Yeah, how far does that get extended upwards? Um, yeah, it's interesting to think like from a storyline perspective, we are living through the most dominant era in Formula One history.
Yeah,
There's never been another time, like now anyway, you could say there's never been a time where a team has been so dominant.
yeah. I mean, the only comparison that I have in my mind is just the consecutive years of Mercedes dominance.
Mm-hmm.
But there was never this just like, I mean, people are saying things like, and this is another question that I had for you because I was thinking about it over the past couple days, just like during my day at work. And there was I think Toto had said that it feels like it's Red Bull versus a bunch of F2 cars. And when you look at it as a whole, I'm like, does this say like something really, like, is it Red Bull hitting it out of the park and just dominating because of their, or like, or is it just like the other teams are like did really poorly with like their design and their development and everything? Because it's almost difficult to imagine, especially now that we're in this budget cap, cost cap era, that one team would just so drastically outdevelop every other team on the grid. Like, yes, I get it. Lewis got pole position in qualifying and everything. Clearly, Red Bull had set their car up for race pace for
Yeah.
Max because
Yeah.
he just was gone once the race started and everything. So it's like, and I'm sure it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that kind of
Of
thing.
course.
But like, I I don't know which one it leans more towards. Like, is Red Bull just, did they just figure, is Adrian Newey just this mega brain guy with the with the Red Bull car design, or did the other teams just like flub something? It's bizarre to see this much of a gap since we did see such a dominant Mercedes team for, I mean, 8 constructors championships in a row.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's something about the development lag time where like you don't get to catch your opponent immediately, and when we're in a time where the regulations were just shifted, the car design is totally new, right? Um it seems, wait, am I crazy? Was last year,
Well, last year was the first year with the new regulations, but then like Red Bull had a big lead that last year, but I expected it, like the gap has closed in the field in
right?
terms of positions, but then for Red Bull to have won every race this season thus far, Max has 7 in a row. It's mind-boggling. Like there has been, and yes, that's also in part due to Max being just like an
Wunderkind.
just like amazing driver.
Yeah.
That has
Seems
to,
to be hitting on all cylinders.
yeah. I mean, I saw for your Max stat for this week,
Max stat of the week.
he has now won 24 Grand Prix since the start of last season. We're halfway through this season, and he has won 24 races in the last
Dominant.
year and a half, which would tie Juan Manuel Fangio's career total and be one short of Jim Clark and Nicky Lauda's career race win total in a year and a half span. Like, that is an unprecedented level of just dominance. And
It's unfortunate though because like two of Nicky Lauda's seasons are in one of Max's. So he
oh,
has more
absolutely.
races, like quote unquote, a higher density of opportunities, you would say.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's still fucking impressive. I think you just have to caveat the seasons used to be shorter. That's all.
Well, yeah, and I guess with that being said as well, in those seasons that were shorter, if Nicky Lauda with a car that was winning him consistently, like, or putting him up there in the contention to win races, were
Sure,
longer, then there's of course going to be more race wins in that same weekend or that same season
sure.
before car changes and whatnot for the next year. So yeah, I mean, but just to put it in like
Mm-hmm.
a race win perspective, like these legends of racing, Nicky Lauda, Jim Clark, Juan Manuel Fangio, like being eclipsed by in terms of race wins in a year and a half span is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
More races or not, like that is a pace that I don't think there probably haven't been many drivers who have been on that
Right.
kind of pace in terms
Right.
of race wins and all.
Well, and that's why it is a minor caveat because it's still just like super impressive no matter no matter what way you slice the pie.
Yeah, but just a crazy level from Red Bull over this year so far. And to talk about the man who we were talking about a lot over the past couple of weeks, just I want to touch on some other drivers across the grid. Daniel
Sure.
Ricciardo, really solid race. I mean, he had a tough start. I know you'll probably kind of talk through the Zhou incident. Well, you talked about the Zhou incident a little bit at the beginning, but I
Mm-hmm.
think there you had a little bit more that detail on it. But Danny kind of getting into that scuffle at the beginning, making it out, a 40 lap stint on the medium tires,
Mm-hmm.
and making his way up into P13, qualified ahead of Yuki, finished ahead of Yuki. Just a great race weekend for Danny for his first time physically driving that AlphaTauri car.
Yeah, and honestly, I think we may have even seen a bit of a better performance from him, even than what he did, just because of the incident at the start of the race that he was involved in. Had it not been for that, he wouldn't have been kind of fighting to get back what he lost. He would have been fighting from a zero position. But yeah, I think I thought it was a solid performance from Daniel Ricciardo back in the AlphaTauri seat, especially like you mentioned, beating Yuki Tsunoda, huge, especially for a team like AlphaTauri. That's kind of all you're really looking for. Like if you're going to zoom in on the drivers, is how are they doing head to head? What's that story like? So I think as far as that goes, Daniel starting off quite well. Unfortunate that he did get tagged there from Joe, but these things happen. It could have been anybody. So I think he recovered the race well, and yeah, overall could be good omens for AlphaTauri.
Yeah, but yeah, really impressive performance from him. Um, and I guess like looking towards the Alfa Romeo squad,
Yeah.
like I said, we had some good qualifying from both Zhou and from Valtteri. We had a P5 P7 start, but from the lights out, it was
Hmm.
a tough situation for Joe coming in there. So
Yeah, and apparently, so this was so all the drivers get interviewed after the race, and I guess it would have been the F1 team that like this was his answer to. So I guess he like totally loses power like as the lights go out. So he has to. I'm not sure how all of the systems work exactly, but my crude understanding of what Joe said was he had to re-engage systems that should already be engaged during that during the like the start process. So he had to like turn it off and turn it on again and do what they called a pull away, which context clues tell me it's a very just like cold start. You're not getting any assistance from any of like the other electrical systems or
no like
like
tire spin and all to like get that heat
right.
and like ramp up. You're just kind of like
Right. So just a totally cold pull away. So that just like I mean that's his race right there. And because of the on the broadcast, Julian Palmer just used the term anti-stall, which I guess effectively is just what it was. He just had a rough start. But then because he's in this maybe save my position type of mindset, he's following a little bit too close to the Daniel Ricciardo in the Alpha Tauri, which makes it, I guess, harder to stop behind them. I guess the dirty air does not allow the cars to stop as well. So like he slams on the brakes and that's just all he had. He slides into Daniel. Daniel then hits the Alpines. They try to re-engage their race but are not able to. You see Gasly's tire fucking fall off and like roll to the side.
yeah.
Very sad sight. But in all of that kerfuffle, the one thing that I thought was very impressive, like if you look at the onboard from Valtteri, who starts directly behind Joe. By the way, this is position 5 and 7, so they're way up ahead of where they usually have been. So this is just like really tough. So Valtteri starts directly behind Joe, and kudos to him because he sees it almost immediately and just cuts left, goes right around Joe, and just tries to like save whatever momentum he just lost for not being able to go just in a straight line. So I think really heads up for Valtteri there to kind of save what he could out of the scenario.
Yeah.
But yeah, based on Joe's response, he was just gutted, just totally from a scenario like that. And I mean, yeah, what are you
Yeah.
gonna do? And then also the guilt of like he knew he takes these other drivers out of the race who's just like I just feel horrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just really tough for Alfa Romeo, I think.
Yeah, a tough position to be in, and again, like really just a brutal day for the Alpine team. They got Gasly came around on that first lap and ended up pitting Ocon. I think or pitting and retiring Ocon. I think he may have gone back out, or he had made it one more lap before they were like, no, something's not right. So tough day for them. But overall, I mean, it was a very exciting race weekend. Oscar Piastri performed well again, just with another great performance as a rookie driver. I think he, I fully expect him to get his first podium before the end of the season,
Bold call.
based on McLaren's progress, based on how well he's driving and how well I felt he was driving early on in the season, just in comparison to Lando. Like, there was not this massive gap, and Lando is a good racing driver. So for him to already be close to Lando's pace early and then now still maintaining that kind of close gap to Lando, and with McLaren's progress, I do think that there's a good shot at him getting that podium here in his first year.
Yeah, I mean, I that all checks out to me for sure. Interestingly, though, the way the McLarens have been able to drive kind of together, in a way, have close finishing positions. Yeah, you would have to wonder, like, where's Lando on that day? Are they both on the podium? Just because I think the McLarens have looked so competitive, looking at 1 to 1.
Yeah, yeah. I think it. Part of it depends on Checo as well. I mean, we talked
Sure.
about him being on the podium again, but there's still, I think, some questions. His qualifying, he made it to Q3, but started down in P9. Like, there are still some questions there in terms of, like, where his head's at. Maybe he'll come out of the summer break just with a fire lit under him, and come out flying. But after that really rough stretch with qualifying and race performances, it's gonna be. I need a little more data to know if he's kind of reeled himself back in and got it out there. Because if that's the case, Red Bull should be 1-2 on the podium at this point, pretty much week in, week out.
That's
But
a good point.
with McLaren, like, yeah, I think Lando should still maintain that gap. But maybe if there's a race that something happens, Lando could get a P1, P2, Oscar P2, P3. You just never know if there ends up being an incident that causes issues for the Red Bulls. I would say that easily could be a first podium for Oscar, but it could also just be purely merit. He's performing really well.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. Definitely, and we've said it before, the best performing rookie I think that we've seen.
Yeah. So, any other, I guess, closing notes for the Hungarian Grand Prix?
Nope, I'm counting them up. I said all my points.
Cool. Well, just to briefly touch on the Belgian Grand Prix this weekend, it is a sprint race weekend, so we have practice session 1 on Friday, qualifying on Friday, and then the sprint shootout Saturday morning, sprint race Saturday late morning, and then the race on Sunday. So busy weekend ahead with the sprint race
Jam-packed.
format. It's going to be at Spa, which is always a fun track to watch, longest track of the season. So longer lap times and whatnot, but should be a fun race coming up.
Yeah, very much looking forward to it. And we'll have coverage of that for you guys next Wednesday. But I think we have a couple of good League of Legends matches to go through. We have a big Silver Scrapes over in the LPL and a nice little 3-game series from the LCK. Obviously, we're not in playoffs for the LCK yet, so the game's having a little less weight, I think, than the LPL games. But Aaron, do you want to start? Do you want to start with the LPL series, something that has a little more meat to it, or go kind
Yeah.
of the bottom of the table for the LCK?
We can go through the LPL. I know we talked a lot about the Hungarian Grand Prix, so to kind of move through this pretty quickly, or not too quickly, but we had OMG versus EDG in a playoff best of 5 matchup in round 2. OMG was seeded into that with the bye from round 1. EDG 3-1's WE to go into this series. So game 1, just coming out, OMG goes for a very dive heavy comp with and I am, where's my picks and bans? Yes, but a big dive heavy comp from EDG with the Sejuani, Akali, the Kaisa, the Rel, and the Camille. So ready to just go in all day long. However, OMG is just able to, like, they played the map really, really well in game one. And I was impressed with, like, their movement. They were able to pick up a lot of turret gold and build a lead without really too many, like, fights early on in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of avoiding those team fights and avoiding that strength from Edward Gaming with the engage and diviness, and kind of just as the game went through, I looked at it and I was like, I knew what that it had gone to 5 games, and after seeing that game one, I'm like, man, I don't imagine how this is going to go to 5 games. It
Mm-hmm.
was a shellacking from OMG.
Yeah, quite a slow start, I think, for EDG. Shanji, I think, has a really strong game here on the Kesante. His farm lead over Ale at one point, I think, was like 40, 45, something
Yeah.
close like this. He has almost Camille's like two topside turrets before Camille even has the tier one on his side. So Shanji, I think, just having a lights out kind of game in that sense, really just giving his team all the advantage from the top side. And then yeah, I don't think one move EDG made like worked out. It was just kind of like,
Yeah, it just sputtered, and I mean
ooh,
that lead in the top side and the with getting the turret plates in for the top lane, along with the CS lead and everything, and then over to the mid lane with Cream. He also was, I mean, in just a very favorable early matchup with the range of the Tristana versus the Akali, that pre-level
yeah.
6, and even post-level 6, being able to hop away, Buster shot the Akali away. The draft from ONG worked out really well, and they were able to build those leads solidly in that top and mid lane early on. Going into game two, though, I just looking at kind of the shift and all OMG goes for, kind of that dive comp that EDG went for in the first game, that all in, doubling down on it with the Yone and the Malphite in the top lane to give that combo and everything there. But OMG, I just like, I was looking at their draft and I'm like, this is questionable. You're going with an AD top lane, an AD mid laner. You've got your AD bot laner. Yes, there are like ranged mid and bot lane, but you have 3 very, very tanky boys on the other side with the Nautilus, the Malphite, and the Maokai, and not much AP damage, barring some small Sejuani damage. I really fully expected OMG to run away with this game as well. But EDG was just really strong with their objective control. And then just the way that they like kind of took fights throughout the game. They were able to get really solid engages, especially with the Sejuani ultimates,
Mm-hmm.
and get the picks and the starts of the fights that they wanted, which just kind of propelled them through this game two to bring it back even.
Well, what I thought was so frustrating about EDG was even when OMG was able to get the Yone ult and the Malphite ult on top of like Fofo, you still have Uzi there to clean up the fight. Even if it's like Uzi that has to like waste his ult, get hooked by the Nautilus, you still have Fofo there to clean up the fight, like with the resets. So even when OMG was playing out their team comp like pretty well, they still didn't have enough to deal with both of these damage sources that
Mm,
were, just protected behind, like you alluded to, the three meat walls. So yeah, I think even when OMG's team comp was going well, EDG was just having those two carries was very tough to deal with.
yeah, it was. I mean, it was a very well played from game from EDG. Like they didn't put themselves in the position to really get beat by the wombo combo from OMG
Right.
and stayed out of that zone. But going into game three, this is where I was really it things got a little funky over in this draft phase. We have the Vayne come out from Uzi. We see Ale go on to the Jax, which is one of his very strong picks that we've seen. It was banned
Mm-hmm.
out in game 1 and 2 by OMG, but
Mm-hmm.
getting Ale on that for EDG. Really really solid pick for him. But the kind of wrinkle that I think ended up being one of the biggest keys for OMG was that Rel jungle. That was a very interesting pick. I haven't seen that. I don't know how much it's being played, but the Rel coming out of the jungle and then eventually being able to get an insane like 4 or 5 man engage knock up for the Yone ultimate was just massive for OMG later in the game. I EDG up until that point, I really was starting to lean in their favor. They were able to
Mm-hmm.
just outlast these team fights. Uzi was doing well on the Vayne. Fofo was getting some chip damage early on in the kind of little back and forth leading up to some of these team fights. But really, once OMG got that, they were able to really kind of take the control of the game, even though the gold lead was even 27 minutes in. They
Mm-hmm.
just get that, pull themselves back up, get the Baron fight, and end up being able to just aggressively push to end the game at that point.
Dude, that Baron fight was so scary for EDG. Like you see OMG coming up from like midside river and Vayne just running away from the pit, and you're just like, oh no. Oh no.
Mm,
EDG just gets totally routed by OMG's positioning. They have
yeah.
players like flanking behind the pit. Like it's like a shark attack, man, the
Oh
way
yeah.
OMG rolls up to that Baron. And yeah, EDG just kind of like what would you say, their defense just got broken immediately. Everybody's flashing over walls trying to get out.
Well, and
And
I
then yeah,
think
like you said.
I think Shanji also got a Poppy ultimate that knocked Gigi out of the pit or something at that Baron fight.
Oh, that's
I'm
huge.
pretty sure, and knocked him behind
Okay.
Baron pit. And I don't
Okay.
think he had his Arctic Assault dash up to be able to get back over. So it was like
Wild.
they yeah, like they shook it up, and EDG was just kind of like, "Oh, we
Mm-hmm.
don't know what to do now. We're just like screwed from the get go." Which was just really impressive from OMG after kind of getting down a little bit early. They were losing the 2v2 in the bot lane. Abel and PP God had got a in a 2v2 fight, got that 2-for-0
Mm-hmm.
win, and so for to kind of climb their way back in like OMG did, I was pretty impressed in that game three from them. Going into game four,
Mm-hmm.
we see that flex pick of the Kaisa going from the bot lane to the mid lane, kind of with the Ezreal, Vayne, Tristana bans from OMG's side, they really tried to target Uzi onto something different, and taking those two other potential bot lane picks pushes him down to the Jinx, but ends up being just fine and dandy for Uzi.
Oh my god. I mean, if this series was not like what's the word? Like quintessential Uzi play. I mean, you got to see it all. And I
Oh,
think
it
this
was
Jinx game was particularly beautiful. His positioning in some of these fights was just immaculate. It was
oh,
beautiful.
and it was from everything from him throwing the ults in and hitting multiple people with the Jinx rocket to get excited and come flying
Hmm.
in there, flashing after. I think you flashed after Cream in that top blue
Hmm.
side jungle to pick up the kill with the rockets as Cream was trying to use his little speed up boost to run away on the
Hmm.
Kaisa. Uzi, he just played so well. Fofo looked really, really good on the LeBlanc as well. But I mean, Ale in the top lane, he gets a double kill, just miracle 1v2 against Shanji and Aki
Oh, that was
early.
dirty.
It was disgusting. He had no health going into the fight, ended up potentially with more health at the end of the fight than he had at the
Hmm.
start,
I think
with
so.
two kills under his belt. Um, but yeah, just a really impressive performance across the board from EDG. OMG tried to make up for getting the Baron steal and everything at one point, but EDG was just closing in so hard on those fights. Ale was getting insane flanks off with the E for Jax to pull off the stuns on multiple people. It just was they had better engage, they had better range, and just were out fighting OMG by the latter stages of the game, and then of course when you thought maybe we'll get one more big team fight. This has been just a banger of a game, a little fight fest. Cream just and gets picked off, and the game's just
Yeah.
over. And it's like it was a very anticlimactic way for such a brawly game to end, but yeah, EDG bringing it to the 2-2 tie. Going into game three, they shift some interesting picks again. We're seeing the Ezreal get picked up for OMG for Abel in the bot lane, which we saw banned in the previous game, but Ezreal has not been that common of a pick.
Hmm.
And then, of course, we see the Victor come out as that LeBlanc counter a little bit on the other side for Fofo against Cream. But just to kind of like, as the game progressed, it was slow from the start, but EDG just was able to build their gold lead pretty early on.
Hmm.
Kind of similar to what we saw in game one from the other side from OMG. And really, as they built that lead, they just kept holding it and like keeping themselves ahead, not taking any big losses. They did have the unfortunate dive that didn't pan out in the bot lane where they
Hmm.
tried to dive, lost two for nothing. But outside of that, I mean, they really were getting great targeting onto Abel in the team fights to kind of isolate him out. PP God wasn't able to get in on the rel to get any like really great ultimates, and EDG controlled the pace of play pretty impressively in that game five.
Yeah, and it didn't seem like until after that bottom lane play. They did kind of reel back the Jets a little bit, kind of cooled off on the aggression, and then we're like the word you use, controlled that game. Yeah, I don't think they gave OMG too many opportunities in. We saw Aki on the Wukong have some decent plays, able to get some good fights going, but EDG ultimately able to take it. I really like Fofo on the Victor. I think he offered up some great like team fight control. I think his some of his positioning was really strong, and gave him and his team like some good angles for the fight, especially on Cream. Was not able to find many openings on that LeBlanc.
Yeah, it was, yeah, very very impressive from EDG, and the Victor I think played out just how they expected it to in that kind of counter matchup to LeBlanc. So yeah, EDG moved on into round 3 there in the LPL playoffs. They end up, since we do have more data, going up against Top Esports and losing in a 3-2 to Top Esports. So a impressive performance from them, but unfortunately ending up in that 5 to 6 range and not at least not yet potentially into Worlds qualification on their end as they the playoffs progress. But looking over into the LCK, into these later stages of the LCK season, summer season before playoffs, you wanted to look at the Nongshim and Kwangdong Freaks matchup that we had this past week.
And this was like less of one of the top of the table matchups. We had like the easy choice for this week would have been Genji versus KT, you know, top of the table, heavyweight bout, like huge records on these guys. But that was just 2-0 and like not a close one either. So our choices are dwindle significantly after that series doesn't go that well. Yeah, I'm not sure we got to go like game by game. Interestingly, this was probably a matchup that Kwangdong Freaks should have won, based on based on their record, based on where they are in the standings. But for Nongshim, this is one of very few chances to get a dub in their like stretch of games coming up. Their schedule gets much tougher after Kwangdong Freaks. So it's interesting for Nongshim to be able to get a dub here because they kind of keep their playoff hopes like in their own control. Getting this dub over Kwangdong gives them the best hope possible to get some dubs over these teams. I mean, they have D+, DRX, T1, and I think KT still to play as well. So, like, it gets pretty rough here for Nongshim.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, they've got some, DK, DK, KT, Brion, and Hanwha.
Brion, okay.
And Hanwha Life. So, Brion, okay. So looking based on standings right now, that Brion matchup is really their best opportunity of getting into the playoffs. I mean, they're right on the edge there. Same record as Brion at the moment at 4-10. So that could be the key factor of potentially making it into that last playoff position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think this is from that perspective. I think this is a great series for Nongshim, and fortunately, Kwangdong Freaks did not seem too intent on winning the game. There are a couple moments that are just like massive question marks, like in game 1, the Taeyun ult to the almost dead Viego. That is almost GG just right there. Like, there are some other opportunities that they can take their fate into their own hands, but that was he just like suicides into them effectively. So there's some moments like that kind of all over the series, you could say. from the Kwangdong Freak side of it, I think they play the double 80 carry team comp. I think they did that really well. Like I think game 2 was just their best game, and not just because they won that. I think the way they like executed those team fights looked seemed to be where they looked best, I should say. But with the series overall, like the implications are null. So just to kind of round out the conversation on the series, I'll ask you this question: would you prefer, or maybe not even prefer, do you enjoy a player on a meta win rate champion, or do you value, or could you value a player that has a high skill on a non-meta champ?
Um, it depends how non-meta. I think that putting Dud, is it Dutta? I always
Doo-doo or
do
Dan Dan?
Dan Dan. So putting Dan Dan on the Quinn, for instance,
Oh,
I
oh, you're talking about doo doo for Kwangdong Freaks.
oh
Yeah, that's
yeah
just
yeah
straight up
dude.
doo doo.
I couldn't remember what I had heard, and so I'm like I didn't want to call him doo doo unless he is, but I would say I would prefer the if you can play it to like a professional level, I'd prefer the meta champion, especially because it fits. They're not always just meta champions because of how good they are in the 1v1, say for top lane or for mid lane or
Hmm.
whatever. They're not meta because like this is a great 1v1 champion, because the meta in professional play is always different from what it is in solo queue and whatnot, where you can play just like anything or you can
What
play
you're
them.
good at, yeah.
But in the professional scene and these matchups, like the reason that some champions are meta is because how they fit into the team comps and play styles that you're looking to play, as well as being minimum level serviceable in whatever role that they play, if not higher. Like Ornn is not necessarily meta, but he's serviceable as a pick in the right team comp and
Hmm.
all. But to break out something like a Quinn just because it is a good 1v1 matchup versus a Renekton is stupid to me, because you're just picking something that, in my opinion, is not going to be very useful for you in the team comp. If you want something that's going to be that split push, different threat, and everything, like I would much prefer the Gwen, the Camille, the
Sure.
Fiora, or something like pick Fiora into Renekton. Fiora, you can parry the stun, you have the ability to brawl it out and everything, and you can split push very well while maintaining your mobility and everything in the late game. Where Quinn, yeah, you're mobile when you have your ultimate and you can fly around, but as soon as you start fighting, you're in short range, close combat. So something like that, for instance, I would much rather them pick a more meta champion than just someone who is happens to be a one trick Quinn or other champion player.
Hmm.
Just because you could crush it on that champion doesn't mean that that champion and you crushing it on it will lead you to win the game.
Hmm. Yeah, and we saw that plan kind of backfire here in game 3, obviously. They get the Quinn as the counter matchup for Renekton, and then Nongshim just proceeds to just kick down that top lane and say, we'll just kind of nullify your pick then.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty big unfortunate for Kwangdong Freaks in that scenario, just because I think like they would have been favored in this matchup. But yeah, kudos to Nongshim taking it in 3 games. I think they played really well and were able to kind of punish and abuse what Kwangdong Freaks was not doing that well. So from that angle, I think it was a pretty fun series to watch, honestly. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see either of these teams in the playoffs, but we may see some of their players later down the line on some of these top teams, especially maybe like uh, what would you say? Maybe like a Bulldog, possibly, or a Young Jay, specifically from Kwangdong Freaks.
Yeah, I think Young Jay has had some really good performances through the year, so I that wouldn't be too shocking to me to see him. And Bulldog too, if you get him on the right picks, but he still has these just int moments
Yeah.
that he needs to kind of shape up before I think he would be in that position to move up the rankings. In the mid lane, he's still a little bit of a liability in terms of just like decision making. His play can look really really good, but it's when he sometimes just makes these fluky decisions and ends up paying the piper for it. So. But yeah, an interesting like matchup, being on the edge of that playoffs, but most likely not making it in.
Right.
We are getting an opportunity because I mean we've seen it in other regions. We had in the LPL teams making runs through the playoffs in the spring split. We saw Golden Guardians do it in the LCS in the spring split. So you never know. Like making the playoffs, it's there are a number of sports where I feel like just once you make the playoffs, it's a whole new ball game. You never know what kind of upsets could happen and all. So really just getting there and potentially making that run up into a playoff spot. And like Nongshim still has that small chance of sliding in there.
Yeah, it would be impressive. But yeah, it's probably not the thing to bet on. But yeah, we are getting towards the end of the show here. Let's go through our flavor of the week here. Aaron, why don't you tell me about yours?
Sounds good. So for my food this week, Colleen and I got Thai food with her brother and sister-in-law for dinner on Friday, and
Nice.
so we went over to their place after work, had some Thai food, played some Monopoly, just hung out. I won. Don't give me that look. I'm a
That's
Monopoly
fair.
winner, man. So
Champion.
so
How long did it take? That just sounds like a long time.
we play on the Nintendo Switch, so it's actually goes pretty quickly. The game it
That's
was
pretty
like
cool.
hour it was like an hour and 10 minutes or so for the
Okay,
game. So
okay.
not a brutal slog of a game. I think it's because the playing it on the Switch makes it more difficult to make weird trades and stuff like that, and to try and like weasel your
Yes.
way through the game.
Yes.
Because of that, I think less trades and whatnot happen, and then the game progresses a little more quickly. You're not having people rolling the dice and knocking over pieces and going, "Oh, where was that piece?" and
Right.
whatnot. So it was
Having the game take care of all the back end is super nice too. Doing the math for the money is really great.
so easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was good in the Thai. So I got Penang curry, which I haven't had in quite some time, but it's like my go-to Thai food. Just really solid. Enjoyed that a lot. For my music this week, I'm just excited because my buddy Shane was like, "Hey, this artist Petey, who I've talked about before, who we found through TikTok, is going to be coming to Philly later this year. Let's get tickets. They're not too expensive." And I was like, absolutely, count me in. So I'm just excited about getting those tickets for Petey later this year.
Oh yeah.
And then for my visual medium, Colleen and I started a show called Severance, which is on Apple TV. It's the plot or the concept behind it is there are a group of people who go through what they call having their life severed, where you when you go to work, your brain kind of like your outside and outside of work life brain shuts off and your work brain kind of turns on, and they
Right.
have no connectivity between each other. So the outside person has no clue what the work person does. The work person has no idea what the outside person's life is like and everything.
Gotcha.
There's this disconnect. And just going through kind of the story of this guy who goes through and has himself severed, and then is now going through and trying to kind of piece together some behind the scenes things going on with this company that is doing this process and all. So
Interesting.
yeah, very interesting show. It's only a couple seasons in, so we're catching it kind of early to catch up for an upcoming season and all. But we're enjoying it. It's very, very interesting and kind of gritty kind of show where
Okay.
you're it's pretty kind of dark thematically throughout the show so far. So
Gotcha.
it's been an interesting watch, and just an overall like well made and kind of so far well developed show. So
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
I know Noel and Cody, the homies, talked very highly of the show. I know they watched it.
yeah, so we're enjoying it for sure. We had a number of people talk it up to us. So
Sweet.
so yeah, that is my flavor of the week for this week.
Gotcha. Wait, aren't you missing one?
No, my Penang curry, my PD music, and my Severance.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah! What have you
Well,
got for the people?
In some way, I was like, what was the Monopoly? Where did that fit in there?
Oh yeah, that was
but
that was with dinner.
How's the computation work where the addition of something made me think that you forgot something? I was like overloaded with data.
It just threw off the routine. So
I literally just had to do a reboot right there.
My apologies. You're like Joe at the starting line now. So let's you can get your peel away.
Yeah, I've got to just do a slow pull away here. So my music here for the week. I've been hitting the shuffle button a whole lot more to just get some some jams going, whatever the world wants to give me. Chance the Rapper has been coming up a decent amount between like Coloring Book, Acid Rap. He's got a lot of good stuff there, especially on Coloring Book. There's some there's some bops on there that have aged quite well. So I think Chance has he's got some good tunes. I enjoy listening to him. For my food here for the week, my love affair with coffee, I think, just has to end. I've tried all sorts of rules and gimmicks. I think I just need to do one caffeinated cup a day and just call it right there. Just for many reasons, I won't go into all of them, but I think it's time. I need to be an adult, be a one cup man from now on, not be out gallivanting with all these other cups throughout the day. So it's getting pretty wild.
I guess I'm not an adult because I am just I'm a caffeine fiend some days. So
Bro, you and me both.
Yeah, I can
I'll miss
relate.
it.
But hey, there's always decaf.
Well, that's the thing is I thought decaf was the answer.
It still has some caffeine.
Right.
Yeah,
It's a problem. I'm just gonna become like a diner dweller and just be like, well, I'm out. I'm gonna have a cup of coffee. I'm just gonna do that kind of thing.
All right.
And then my visual medium here for the week. Sarah's a big Harry Potter fan, so she just kind of throws the movies on, just like,
Solid. Yeah.
just
Just
as
background noise and
right.
yeah.
And so I'm not sure about the other films, but I know for a fact that David Yates is the director for 5, 6, 7.1, and 7.2. And after you've seen a movie for a couple of times, you can kind of stop worrying about it like as a movie and seeing like, okay, what's going to happen in the next scene? Like, oh, and thinking about it just from like just choices being made stylistically. I think David Yates is a very exciting director to watch. I don't think I ever I don't think I ever gave enough credit to the production team for like how interesting they end up making the movies. I think I would have given a lot of weight to just the story carrying so much, where it's like, oh, just what is happening is just interesting enough that you could present it in any way and it would be like fine to me.
Gotcha.
But, and this is what I'm saying, like you dig a little bit deeper just below like just Harry Potter, and there's actually like a beautiful movie actually being made where there are some interesting choices. I think the color schemes are beautiful. There's like some really interesting like framing for some shots that he does that like are very memorable and kind of like stick out in your mind. So going back to specifically six really is like six is stylish as fuck, I would argue. Um
And I would
and
say
go ahead.
his like pacing in the movies is like impeccable too, because there are some parts that are a bit slower and have these that could have these like lulls. But the pacing, like he gets all the information that you're looking for from those scenes, and then
Mhm.
moves those along like fluidly without feeling rushed, but
Mhm.
also not like lingering too long on boring shit.
Yeah. So yeah, I think they're just beautiful movies, and I've enjoyed going back to them in that regard.
Nice.
Instead of just looking at it as one thing, finding another within the same, within the same thing. So I thought that's been awesome. But that's my flavor of the week.
Solid. Well, as always, ladies and gents, that does bring us to the end of this longer than normal episode, but we appreciate you guys taking the time to spend with us and listening week after week. You can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube if you want to see our smiling faces, and hit us up on Twitter at tall and short of one, the number one, if you guys are interested in just chit chatting with us or giving us some feedback on the episodes, getting in any questions you have about some of the different topics we touch. But yeah, why don't you take us on out of here, Justin?
Just tell your friends, new episodes every Thursday. Tell them where to find us on the Twitters, on the YouTubes, on the Spotifys. It's just a hoot and a holler here. So we just appreciate you spending your time. Thank you so much. We truly appreciate it. So yeah, just thank you very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Tall and Short of a Podcast. Peace out, everyone.
See ya.